All right, welcome back, everybody. I thought I would do my series again. I got pretty off track. I actually moved in real life and kind of slacked a little bit on it. Had some other stuff going on, so I'm back at it now. We did the catcher, first base, and third base rankings before, and now I'm going to try to finish off the rest of the series and make some short episodes. I'll go a little bit quicker. As I said, I'm pretty far behind, so I'd like to get this finished before the season starts. So today, let's start at second base. So today's second base rankings, I have Sal Stewart here is an honorable mention. I wanted to throw him in the end of this list. He's played a lot of third base, but Detroit signed him. It looks like he's going to be a nice second baseman for them. He has a pretty sick skill set at second base. The range is decent. It's the air that really stands out to me. He played a lot of third base last year, as you see, pretty ridiculous. He only had one error in like 250 innings there, and then only 4 errors in 800 innings at second. The 80 error is just amazing. So it really makes up for the little bit of lack of range. The turn double play and range are just like average or just a smidge below average for second base, but then that air is so high and such a good arm for second base. It makes him pretty much like an above average defensive second baseman. So when you have that with the 75 base running is really important. Helps him out a lot on the base pass. And then the big power here, 55 power and gap for a second baseman. Middle infield is pretty awesome. The contact and avoid K are low, which could be a little worrisome. Could have potentially out of a couple of years there in Detroit. Oh, he's actually only signed for 1 year. But he could have like a potentially like a 200 batting average. It's a really tough stadium to hit in. So if he gets pitched too well and has a down year, I could see it. That's why he's like not super high in this list. But I think if he had a decent year, kind of like last year, like Miami's almost as hard to hit in as Detroit is, and he hit almost 270 with 18 home runs. So anywhere close to that 117 WRC production, it makes him a really valuable second baseman. So that's why I want to have him as an honorable mention. Next up on this list, we have Bryson Stott. Bryson Stott is a oh, I spelled that name wrong. Bryson Stott here. Oh, it's Stott. Okay, I always thought it was Scott. Never noticed that. So Bryson here had a big time season there in Arizona. He had really good defense at second base there. Pretty decent hitting too. He actually hit for some good power. Strikeout rate was down a little bit. Stole a couple bases. Just kind of overall, you wouldn't really think looking at stats at first. It's like a 3-WAR season with 12 home runs, hitting like 280. But overall, with good defense, hitting that well. I think he played a little bit above his talent level, but it's a really good approach, like a 60 and a 55. The guy had a 780 OPS, so at second base with plus defense, good base running, pretty decent contact and all that for a 34-year-old. That's a really nice season. So he was the next honorable mention on there at number 11. So the top 10 now will jump in. I really like second baseman. I don't know, something about it's always one of my favorite spots. So number 10 is Kevin Brown from Montreal. Kevin Brown showed up in the playoffs huge. He was a monster and had a ton of power. He had 2 home runs in that game against Detroit there. Won them that game pretty much and really kind of broke out. He has crazy gap power, really good home run power. He's essentially Sal, exactly what we just said with Sal Stewart, but he has a little bit better approach and a little more gap power. They both have that 45 contact, both pretty decent base runners. He's just a really good, and he's a switch hitter too, so that makes him really nice. He hit 270. So if you remember, Sal Stewart hit about exact same 270, almost 267 or something, and then also had about 18 home runs. And so they're right around the exact same stats. I think Kevin Brown just has a little more defense there with a 60 range, 60 turn double player, both really valuable at second base. Just both overall really good skill sets. So sound like similar players there, I thought. I really expect Brown to have a couple big seasons there with a lot of opportunities in that lineup to get some RBIs and stuff, some big bats ahead of him. So really nice young player there, cheap guy from Montreal. Next up is a little bit of a sad story. Art Van Winkle, unfortunately, had a pretty big regression for me. I know my scout accuracy has been great, but I also know he went down with the OSA and some other friends I talked to. He looks like he went from like in his prime there at 23, 24 years old. He was like a 80, 75 hitter. Now he's down to a 55. So still a plus hitter. It's just not that incredible elite hit tool that he used to have. Still has crazy gap power. Still has really high avoid K. Still has that really good defense second base. Doesn't have the air, but has a really good range and turn. Should be a really top tier first baseman too if he is planning to play him there a bit. Should be an elite Gold Glove type guy there. So the bat still plays. I just don't quite have him as a top 3 second baseman anymore with the downturn in contact. It doesn't give him that elite hit tool to make up for the 45 power. Some of these other guys ahead of him have a lot more power. So I think he's still really good and like a top 8 second baseman in baseball out of 32 teams, which is pretty good. I just don't have him as that elite, like 6-7 WAR guy, I don't think, in the future after this contact downturn, but I could be wrong in selling him a little bit short. Next up, I have Matt Boone. Matt Boone broke out the last couple seasons in a big way. He has a really cool skill set. He's a plus contact guy with really high void K. He only strikes out 13% of the time. The guy has crazy overall skill set. He can do everything pretty well. He's a plus all across the board except for power. The power is still 35, so he still hit double-digit home runs this year. You'd expect him to hit between 5 and 10 most years. He's coming in on his age 30 hitter. He's also a spray ground ball guy, which is a lot more important than I used to think it was. Anyone that's like a pull ground ball guy that doesn't have a lot of power really hurts their batting average, so it really helps them get a lot more infield singles, especially these guys can't shift as much against them. So really just a guy with high gap power and the good spray hitter there and the ground ball stuff really helps. Good runner too. So just an overall really balanced profile. And just plays really well at second base. He's just if he just had a bit more range, he could actually be a pretty good shortstop too. So makes him a real plus second baseman, though. A really good rangy guy there. Next up, we get to our top 6. So Freddie Underwood. Freddie Underwood on Nashville, our first Nashville Outlaws I think we've had so far, maybe on this list, on any of the lists. Freddie, at first, when you look at him, you're like, how the heck did he have 6 WAR last season? But 25 home runs. The guy has 50 power, and my scout probably a little bit low on that because he hit 25 home runs back-to-back years. So my scouts only had 45, 50 on the whole time. But the guy is crazy stealing and base running. Just an elite guy in the base pass. One of the best base runners in baseball, plus 6 UBR, plus 9 BSR. The guy has 70 range, plus air, and plus turn double play. Pretty decent arm, 45 at second base there too. Most guys have like between 40 and 50 at second base. So just has everything you look for. The eye isn't quite as high, but he has such high void K, it kind of makes up for it. So he doesn't walk a lot, but he also doesn't strike out a lot. He's pretty much making contact with the ball. Like if you add those two together, that means he's not striking out or walking like 81% of the time. So makes a ton of contact, and since he's making so much contact, that the power plays up a bit. So real big 6'3" athletic second baseman that has some pop in his bat. So really nice season all across his career. Isn't quite that crazy 6 WAR year he had the year before, but he only struck out 11% of the time that year too, which is outrageous. And almost a 20 stolen base guy, so only got caught once last year. So really talented player. Could probably steal 30 bases if the manager really jacked up the stolen base to max and then had him as a leadoff guy or something. But yeah, just a really, really nice player. And you wouldn't think he'd be so good when you look at that profile and see a bunch of 50s and 35i, but really, really nice. Really, really nice player there. Next up, we have the free agent, Louis Urias. Louis is really similar to cup guy in a couple spots below on this list, Matt Boone. He's just like Matt Boone with a little bit more power, which is why he's higher in this list. He pretty much has the same defensive skill set as Boone. Really, really solid. 60 range, 65 air. If you look last year, he played 94 games in Cincy in 53, so played like 140 games of the two spots, right around zero zone range guy. Had quite a bit of errors, surprisingly, with that 65 air, so he should play even better there next year. Guy's a really nasty base runner. Doesn't play too aggressively on the base pass, but has really high stealing base running ratings. Really high eye. The guy's a crazy on base percentage, so he's 350, 360, and 330 last year. Last year is like, if you average them together, is almost 350, and the year before is 350. So it's a second baseman that gets on base that much. That's a good runner that plays good defense, has a little bit of pop in his bat. 24 home runs last season between the two hitters parks, so played up like crazy because those are the two big right-handed bat home run parks in baseball. So just a really, really good season. He had over 4 WAR last year, 3 the year before. So 133 WRC plus guy last season when he was in Cincy. So just a crazy skill set for second baseman there. All right, next up, we have the San Diego Jose here. Jose has crazy power, so he has to be pretty high up in this list. His WAR is a little bit lower because San Diego has been using him at short, but I think the way I design these lists, I know different teams have different skill sets, and they have like multiple shortstops, so sometimes guys have playing guys out of position. Not out of position, but a position they're not the strongest at because of positional depth. So the way I do these lists, I just try and rank the guy where I think, in my opinion, he's best at. So I think this guy is probably like the most valuable player at second, but for San Diego, they might think he's most valuable short. So that's how it goes. It's not like they're in the wrong position or something. I just figure, just my point of view, where I think they could bring the most value if it was like a free agent draft kind of thing. So Escorche here looks like the ideal second baseman. It takes advantage of his crazy air and turn double play. And then the pretty plus range and also a really good arm. So really nasty skill set. The super elite at third base or second and can definitely get by at short a little bit. He has fly ball hitting at 65 power, which makes him so crazy. 41 home runs in 2029, and then he had a little bit of a down year the year after, only hit 200, and then he bounced back this year and hit 255 with 33 bombs. The guy has always been a plus base runner, and he has some major pop in his bat. So I think if you gave him a whole season at second base, he's has a shot at being like a top one of the top players in baseball. He just brings that. If you have that much power and eye at second base with such a plus skill set on defense and good running, you just pretty much don't have any weakness. He's going to strike out quite a bit, but that always happens when guys have that major power there. So really, really elite bat in the middle of the infield there, which makes him number 4 on my list. Next up, we have another elite bat in the middle. Number 3 is Gleyber Torres. Gleyber has a ridiculous skill set, probably a little better at third when it comes to the defensive side of things. But if you can get by at second base with that kind of bat, even if you're a negative defender, it's worth it. He had -5 zone range last year in 17 errors, but like I said, you kind of waste a little bit of that 70 arm at second, but when it's still pretty good skill sets. Still all green across the board there, 60 turn double play. So really, really serviceable at second base for sure, with an incredible bat. 43 home runs back-to-back years. So in 2 years at second base, I don't think many guys in the history of baseball, if anyone, has had 86 home runs between 2 years. That might be a record. Just a ridiculous talent. Almost the exact same profile as the San Diego guy we just talked about. Really similar, just maybe a little bit more contact, the higher void K, but really, really similar players. So those guys both at number 3 and 4 on this list, just elite bats with pretty solid defense. Love Gleyber Torres, man. What a powerful bat there. Super valuable player in New York. And next up, this guy was actually on the move a couple weeks ago. So he's in his new home there in Tampa Bay. Looks like they're going to play him at second base, but who knows? If he is at second base, I have him as his number 2 second baseman in baseball. The guy has shortstop range and air and turn double play. The arm is a little weak, but he could definitely get by at shortstop. He's a 65 shortstop, but Cleveland had some other guys to play there, so they've actually put him at second. And I think Tampa also has a really defensive, rangy shortstop. So it looks like he can settle in as like a top 3 defensive second baseman in baseball. Guy has a major, major skill set with plus avoid K, plus power. He has a nice gap power, 50s across the board, fly ball guy. So just everything you look for there. Major power there at second base. So when you have a guy that has 70 range that can hit you like 35, 40 home runs a year, that's just pretty self-explanatory. So what a crazy value there. And he's only under contract for $5 million this year. He has 2 years arbitration left, so he's going to be like a $9 million and like a $14 million guy. So really good value the next 2 years too. Really shrewd pickup there by Tampa Bay. Makes them a lot tougher now. And then number 1 couldn't be anyone except for Ed Howard. Ed Howard has an unbelievable skill set. Ed Howard is the best base runner I've ever seen in my life. He had 16.8 BSR and over 10 UBR, so it's just like the best base running season I've seen in the history of the park. The guy had 61 stolen bases, and he played elite defense, big time. Only 12 errors in 1,300 innings, had plus zone range. The guy had a crazy offensive season too, not just the stolen bases, but he hit 290. He had a 378 on base percentage. He had 14 bombs with 50 power there, a lot of plate appearances, and then he walked 11% of the time, which is really, really good. That's like what the elite sluggers usually walk. So crazy season he had. 7.2 WAR, one of the best players in baseball, probably up there in the MVP rankings for sure. Just an amazing player, and as you can see, he got rewarded with a $28 million contract and then an opt-out, and then if he sticks around, it's 34, 37, 37. So the guy deserved a massive payday with the season he had, one of the best, most ridiculous seasons in baseball. So that's it for second base. Let's move on to shortstop here. We have a lot of honorable mentions. We're just going to quickly go over them here. So Rafael Morel is an honorable mention here. That's the guy that looks like he's going to be one of the best free agents here. Just an elite defensive profile with almost a 50 bat, really good base running. Had a really good season in Tampa Bay last year. And then I have Monegro. Monegro, I think, is actually going to move to second base now in Boston. They traded for a big-time defensive shortstop, so it looks like they're going to kick Monegro over to second base, where I think if he plays there most of the season, I think on next year's power rankings, when I update them, wouldn't be surprised if this guy jumps into the top 7 or 8 second baseman with that kind of power and defense and base running and contact. Love his skill set. So he had a pretty good season at shortstop here, 40 home runs. So had to be an honorable mention for sure. Yordys Valdes is on this list too. Looks like he lost a little bit of contact from my new scout, but the guy's just so ridiculous defensively, and his eye is so high that he walks almost 10% of the time. So even though he's not a great bat, he hit 10 home runs with that low power. So stole a couple bases. So did just enough to get a 72 WRC plus with elite defense, which makes him like a top 15 shortstop in baseball. And then next up we had Alexander Vargas. Alexander Vargas is a shortstop. Sorry, he's plays second base, but that's because Atlanta has another guy on this list at shortstop. So I think on most teams he would be a shortstop with that incredible defensive profile. And the bat at 94 WRC plus made him a 4.5 WAR second baseman. I personally put him at at shortstop on this list just because I think if he was on about half the teams at least in baseball, probably more would have him at short. So again, I think either spot he's very valuable, pretty similar. It's just probably even a tad more valuable at short, but maybe I'm wrong. Drew Bowser is next on this list, just outside the top 10 there. At number 11, Drew Bowser has a really nasty eye. He had a little bit of down season last year. I think I had him higher in this list before when I initially ranked it, but I bumped a few guys above him that had big years, and Bowser got injured and had a little bit of down year, but still almost a top 10 shortstop. I think he can make his way back into the top 10 if he recovers and has a season like he's had the last few years. Had averaged most of 17 home runs the 2 years before, and had some pretty good overall stats, almost exactly a 100 WRC plus player the last 2 years. And then, like I said, last year with his down year, even before he got injured, just a little bit below that. But at 30 years old, looks like he hasn't regressed at all. So should have a couple more prime seasons in him. Big time talent. All right, so in our top 10 here, we have Perdroza is number 10 on this list. The guy has a crazy defensive profile. He has 80 arm, 80 air. So the guy has a rocket. He had over 5 WAR last season. Only 7 errors out of shortstop with 1,200 innings. It's pretty ridiculous. And he was a plus defensive player there. Crazy eye. One of the best eyes in baseball. 15% walk rate makes his on base crazy high, 360. That's with like a 45 contact, 50 avoid KE with a 360 on base percentage. Is pretty nasty. Right at league average, 300 BABIP there. Really nasty player. Really valuable shortstop there. Can do a lot of things really well. Next up, we have our free agent on this list. Robert Puason is slotted in one spot higher. Puason is just such an incredible, consistent shortstop because he actually has some power in him. Can hit double-digit home runs. He's averaged 10 home runs last 2 years, and he has incredible base running and incredible defense. So there's just so many elite defensive shortstops in FTD. It's pretty crazy. That profile, he's going to get a huge contract. Right now, he wants like a ridiculous, like 9-year, $25-30 million a year almost. So it's tough to pay a guy that much, but he's probably worth it with how good he is. He's just insane. Luke Leto is next on this list. Probably could have had him a few spots higher. Had one of the most ridiculous seasons I've ever seen in the history of baseball. The guy played about 60% of the season plate appearance wise. He missed a lot of games, but when he was healthy, he hit 323. He had a 370 on base percentage. The highest BABIP I've probably ever seen, 413, is just outrageous. And that's not like 30, 40 games and something. Like 103 games is still a lot. Like that's what a starting catcher plays, like a full-time starting catcher plays offensively. So the 413 BABIP over almost 400 plate appearances is just ridiculous. The guy had pretty low ISO, doesn't hit the ball very hard, gap power or home run wise. But he stole 25 bases to bring a lot of value to his game. So he ends up with a 118 WRC plus. Probably the best possible offensive season you could have with that profile. I don't think if you simmed like 30 seasons, that would probably be like number 1 out of 30. Just because that BABIP is so ridiculously rare. He might have another year where he has a few more home runs. Like sometimes 35 power guys hit like 12 home runs. He probably could replicate like a 120 WRC plus, maybe like 2 or 3 times out of that 30. But that's just the kind of season he had. Not saying he's overrated because he got lucky last year. Like he really is insanely elite. Incredible base runner, so he can stretch some singles and stuff out. And then he also has pretty much the best defense profile in baseball. So he's worth 5 WAR last season. I think that, like I said, that was probably a bit on the high end. I think generally the offense wouldn't quite be so good. That skill set probably on general have like an 80, 85 WRC plus. So that's why I didn't have him higher on this list. But I think with the season he had last year, I probably could have had him in the top 5. I think I probably would have if he just had 20 or 30 more games. But it's just I had a tough time putting him above all these super talented guys above him. But pretty dang close to being like in the top 5. So I think next up, we have Amador. So Amador is just ridiculous too. Really similar profile to Luke Leto, just a bit more oomph in his bat. He has a little more gap power and home run power, and the eye is really good. The guy has 310 on base percentage. The on base percentage year before about 320. So the guy just has like see that's more of the Luke Leto profile, like the 85 WRC plus. A little bit of a down year, so it's probably a little silly to have him ahead of Luke Leto with the difference in WAR there, where also only played 90 games. So it's probably I could flip those guys on second thought, but something about Amador, man, just like how much incredible shit he has in this profile, that how much better his bat is. It didn't show it last year, but I think going by the ratings a little more, I think he's probably a little more talented player than Leto. I think Leto's had a crazy BAPIP season, but anyways, they're really close. They're really both incredible players. So not to get too nitpicky on the order there. Next up, we have Josh Richardson. Josh Richardson, if you're wondering why he wasn't in the second base rankings, again, I have him as a guy that could be a top-level shortstop. Milwaukee has another guy on this list too. Same as Atlanta. Both guys have 2 shortstops on this list in the top 12, so I didn't rank them at second. I just ranked them where I thought he could. I think this guy could easily be a plus shortstop for almost any other team. They just happen to have the best defensive shortstop in baseball. So he kicks over to second, where he's probably would have been number 1 on that list, ahead of probably would have been just ahead of Ed Howard or like right about equal with him. That'd be a tough call, but that's how good he is. He is incredible bat. The guy had averages about 20 home runs a season over the last 3 years, and he's a spark plug, high work ethic, line drive hitter with huge gap power, huge avoid K, only strikes out in the teens there, 14, 17%, 11% the year before that. Incredible 75 range, which makes him just a ridiculous zone range guy. Plus 14 last season at second base there. So I think he's not really trained up at shortstop, so you might think it'd be silly not to have him at second. I just figured, like, if he was on my team, he'd be a shortstop for sure. And I just wanted to put guys where I thought they'd be in the highest defensive spectrum position that they're able to play, and not factor in, like, who their teammates were. So I think, like, again, if this guy was in a fantasy draft of the whole league, I think you would take him, like, really high and just plug him in as your shortstop. So anyways, that's kind of my reasoning there again. So I'd have him as, like, the number 6 shortstop in the league. One spot above him is Arteaga. Arteaga is just a ridiculous shortstop. He's actually just keeps getting better. I actually had a power jump on him in this offseason, so I think he might even be a little bit more powerful in the future and close in on that 20 home run mark. The guy just has similar profile to a couple of the guys beneath him, but he just seems to hit with a lot more power. And that was before I had the power jump on him. So the OSA still is 50 on him, but I have 55 gap and 55 home run and a 60 eye. So that's just a crazy, like that's almost a first base bat. And that's with a 75 shortstop there. And with that elite base stealing and hitting, guy stole almost 50 bases, only got caught 7 times. I think with that skill set, he has a chance to have some 7 or 8 WAR seasons coming up here. I think he's played a little bit below his talent level up at this point in his career. It seems like his batting averages are a bit low, below average BAPIP this year. So it wouldn't surprise me if he had a monster, almost an MVP type season. The guy is just incredible shortstop. So that's why it's crazy Atlanta had that number honorable mention here, like number 13 on this list, Vargas, because they have both those guys. So those guys just create magic in the middle of the field. Big reason why they won the World Series, just an amazing defense. Next up, we have the best defensive shortstop, in my opinion, in baseball. Him or Luke Leto. Both have all 80s across the board. Preciado in 150 games had 29 zone range with only 4 errors. Probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I am dying to know if there's no 80 max on. You can turn that off. How high some of these categories work, because I think they're even better than 80s most likely. Definitely, I think the error would be way higher, because if you only had 4 errors in that amount of innings, that's one of the best things I've ever seen. Almost every shortstop averages like 17 to 18 errors a season over that amount of time. He only had 4, so I think there's a chance he might have like 90 error and 85 range, and like it's hard to tell with the arm. The turn double play is just so high. So that guy is just like 90 double plays over the season. That guy is just a cheat code at shortstop, and one of the best defensive players I've ever seen. And he's also got a plus bat. The guy on top of all that, he has pretty good stats, like a 100 WRC plus player, which is pretty ridiculous with that defense. So guy had 5.4 WAR, averages like that every single season. Pretty much gets about 5. Just an amazing, amazing player that's had almost 30 career WAR at the age of 28. On top of that, he's 6'4" and he's a switch hitter. So that guy would be one of the most fascinating players to watch. That'd be kind of like this generation's A-Rod guy, just like huge athletic shortstop. He'd be all over the highlight reels. There'd be a lot of jerseys sold for that guy. So incredible, incredible player. Shows how talented the shortstop position is when he's only number 4. So number 3, we have Pacheco. Pacheco is almost as good defensively, just incredible defensive profile, with again almost 80s across the board and in almost all 80s with the running category. He had 30 stolen bases, 32 the year before. The guy has plus power. The gap power really stands out. A crazy, crazy contact guy. Power guy. The gap. The contact's a little bit low, is what I was trying to say, with the low avoid K. But even with those two guys, things being so low, I have him this high in the list just because his overall skill set is just so crazy. He's a high leader, high work ethic captain on top of all that. Just almost a perfectly designed player. Another 6'4" shortstop. Amazing. So the guy's got a crazy contract, 1 year and then potential opt out. And then if he stays in, he's on pace to make 35 a year over the next couple of years. So again, like him and Ed Howard in Pittsburgh, it's going to be fascinating to see how Pittsburgh does this year, because both those guys have potential opt out. So if they both have a really bad year and opt into that contract, or they could both just explode and want to hit free agency and both be guys that want like $40 million a year in free agency, like 8-9 year deals. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in Pittsburgh this year with both of those guys on potential opt outs. Next up, we have Juan Vasquez. Vasquez is number 2 on the shortstop list. He is ahead of those other guys below him. He doesn't have quite as much power, but he has such ridiculous contact and void K. It makes him so, so rare. Kind of like a Nomar Garcia Parra, but better on defense. This guy is a 320 hitter, won a batting title at shortstop with a 387 on base percentage. His gets so many base hits that even with the 45 power, he has such good gap power and stuff. The home runs actually play up a bit. So even with 45 power, he hit almost 20 home runs. I think he could definitely get some 20 home runs here in his prime seasons. He's just amazing, amazing bat. He walks 10% of the time and only strikes out 12. So it's just a super, super advanced offensive profile at the plate there. And then you top that off with a guy that can steal almost 50 bases and as a crazy, crazy base runner. And then on top of that, he has a 75 range rating with 65 and everything else. If you look at him at 147 games, he turned 80 double plays. He had a plus zone range. Just shows how ridiculous Preciado is, because even with all that high ratings, like 65 error, he still had 25 error. Preciado had 4. So that's just, if you think about it, pretty much an error is like an out every time. So that just shows how ridiculous Preciado is defensively. But Vasquez's offense just so, so, so good with the combination of running and defense. Almost the perfect player. And if you were to make a rankings of all the guys in the league under the age of 26, I think Vasquez would definitely be number 1, probably the biggest young star in baseball. There's a couple other really elite players, I think, that would be on that list too. A couple arms like Quintero, I think, is maybe 25 still in Kansas City. But yeah, this guy is just a freak. So number 2 on the list. And number 1 is no other than Royce Lewis. Royce Lewis, another guy, plays a lot of second base in Colorado because, again, they have Amador. But again, same as Josh Richardson. I think if he was on most of the teams in the league, he would be a shortstop. If he was on my team, he'd be a shortstop. The guy has just incredible defensive profile. He's a big-time range and error guy. Really good turn double play, plus arm, huge runner, huge eye. The craziest skill set. The most talented player pretty much in FTD. Guy's 75 error. He walks 15% of the time. Guy had almost 20 stolen bases last season. He's had 19.2 WAR over the last 2 years, over a 400 on base percentage. It's just, it doesn't get any better than this. The guy was already one of the best players in the league. I went back and watched the 2025 trade deadline video where he got moved. Oh man, he already was one of the top players in the league, like 60 contact, I think 50 power, and then he had a TCR and he went and gained 15 power and just went from good to off the charts good. The guy is 32 years old. He is making 32 for the next 5 years, definitely well worth every penny, and has a chance to go down as one of the best players in baseball history. Already at 67 career WAR, and he's just getting warmed up. As you see, he was had a lot of 6 WAR seasons almost every year except for this one year. You got oh no, still yeah, that was the year you got traded. So essentially never below 6 WAR ever since that TCR. Went from being like he was a 7.3 WAR guy before that TCR. It's just oh my gosh. So yeah, this guy is just this is just incredible. So that's the end of this list. I know that episode went a little long, but that was probably the deepest position we had was shortstop. So I wanted to take my time and go over all those super talented dudes, and had a lot of fun talking about it. If anyone's still here at the end of the video, I hope you guys enjoyed also. Next episode, we will do the outfielder, so that'll be a lot of fun. So what an episode, though. What a talented group of guys at these positions. And I will show you the screenshot. This is the rankings so far. I actually did the video for first, third, and catcher, and then since the video is so long, I actually moved some stuff around quite a bit. So the catcher one looks a lot different than it did before. Joey Bart jumped all the way up to second, Sierra at third, and then moved some guys down and whatever. Danny Jansen started to regress with his old age, so moved him down a little bit. And then first base was pretty similar. Didn't really have to move anything. Third base, I jumped Brian Hayes over to third base. I originally had him in my second base rankings, but I figure he's going to go over to Montreal. It looks like he's going to play third base, so I actually jumped him into the top 10 of my third base rankings. If he was at second base, he probably would have slotted in right in that area somewhere, probably right below Urias there, or right equal to him pretty much. So yeah, he's about number 10 on the third base rankings list, and then that was our shortstop list there. So just an incredible group of shortstops there. Just 1 to 6 is just so ridiculous, and then that's all the really nasty elite offensive guys, and then you have a drop off, and you have the pure defensive guys with the 50 bats after that, and then you have some other guys that are really good after that, but not quite in that elite tier category. But those top 4 guys are just so special. So anyways, that's it. Cheers.